take breaks.
Be nice to your brother and sister. Say
Mitch,
something.
if we put chat on, can we see if people put in questions? Is that how that goes?
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
And I usually read those aloud so that the attendees can hear them too. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's very cool.
Because the attendees don't see those. So if you just start answering a question, you could say we have a question and then repeat the question and answer it. That would be fine. But however we do it, we just want to make sure people know what we're talking about. We'll give it one more minute and we will begin. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bread Bakers Guild of America Microbakery Roundtable with Kathleen Busche, Kevin Masse, and Mayhew, Conor O'Neill, and Jackie Lee. Why a microbakery? Well, my good friend Robert Ellinger, I always quote him on this: big bakery, big problems; small bakery, small problems. That's an oversimplification. We'll get into the meat in just a minute. After 10 years of high-level corporate work in New York City, Kevin Masse opened Small State Provisions in West Hartford, Connecticut. His 213 square foot bakery in the West Hartford Gastro Park specializes in 100% organic, naturally leavened breads and his noteworthy olive oil maple granola. Ann Mayhew of LMNOP, and Ann, you have to tell us about the name. I looked it up and I'm not sure what it means. LMNOP Bakery in northern Westchester County, New York, specializes in nutrient-dense and delicious bread with 100% organic, regionally grown, locally milled grains. She's also a participant of the Neighbor Loaves program, which I'm very fond of. Conor O'Neill is the owner and baker of the wholesale and retail Cottage Community Bakery in Linwood, Washington. His focus is naturally leavened bread and traditional pastries using local grains. He recently moved into a larger facility. You'll see it in a minute. Kathleen Busche retired after 27 years as a real estate broker. She thought she would open a bakery in her spare time. She and her daughter, Ora Jewel Busche, started the bakery in Duluth to be liberated to bake what they want, when they want. They specialize in naturally leavened bread and FICA treats. If you're like me, when you Google FICA, it's with a K. Jackie Lee of The Right Dough in Oakland, California, left her corporate tech career to take extensive training and an internship with Craig Ponsford and Nikki Justo at the Central Milling Facility and School. Recently, Jackie passed the written and practical exams to become a certified bread baker in the Bread Bakers Guild of America. That's a brief thumbnail sketch of each person. Now I'll introduce Kevin. Each person, will you just tell a little bit more about your operation, and then we'll take questions and answers from the crew as well as among ourselves. Kevin.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Mitch. I'm super excited to be here amongst such an amazing group of fellow bakers. If anybody had asked me 5 years ago if I would be owning a bakery, I would have said you're out of your mind, but I have wanted to own a bakery my entire life. So the fact that I am standing here in my very own 213 square feet with wonderful colleagues around me working for tomorrow's production, it's a little bit mind-blowing. But for me, I started baking out of my house as a way to just kind of do something extra. I've always been in baking just personally. I work for Bake From Scratch magazine as a separate job in addition to owning this bakery. But I started baking 2 loaves at a time out of my home with my Dutch ovens. And little over little, it's grown into this microbakery. So when I was setting out to create this bakery, and I'm just gonna kind of show some photos here, if I can do this properly. When I set out to create this bakery, for me, it was all about creating community. and really focusing on that community, but also wanting to have some balance in my life. So I've worked in restaurants in college, and I know the toll that it takes, particularly on the owners of the establishments, because you are in essence married to that business. So I wanted to build a bakery that served the community, that was founded in organic bread. I did not start in organic, actually. I started with regular, traditionally milled grains, but then I shifted into organic, and it's been something that I will never shift away from. But I really wanted to create a business that fit my life. So this photo that I'm currently sharing, this is what my bakery setup used to look like at home. So I've never trained professionally. I've never, until a couple of classes that I've taken with the Guild, which I've been very, happy to take. I've learned through community. I've learned through people that I've talked to. I've learned by studying other people or asking a lot of questions and figuring out like what I'm gonna need to start this bakery has all been kind of trial by error and figuring it out on the fly. But one of my, again, this is just to show proximity of how our house was set up with my bakery, literally kitchen, living room, bakery, all in one. And it's really, again, it's been founded in community and really bringing people together around really good bread, which I felt after moving from New York City, it was harder to find here in our town of West Hartford, Connecticut. So as I started to grow, this is actually a picture of the space that I'm currently standing in now, which is what my bakery looked like when I saw it for the first time. As I started to grow, I wanted to meet the demand, but I wanted to meet the demand on my terms. So I knew that I did not want to have, talk to me in 5 years, maybe I will have a much bigger operation. But I knew for me, I wanted to scale in a way that allowed me to have complete control over what we were doing and how we were producing it. Because as somebody who's self-taught or community taught, I know it takes me a little bit more time to ramp up than what it would somebody else. So, it's been completely organic. And when I look at I mean organic in the way that we've grown and our word of mouth. We have spent no money in advertising. We have a great social media presence. And so it's been word of mouth that's really helped drive our growth. And when I sat down and wrote our mission and values, again, it was about prioritizing this and the bakery and also other parts of my life. I have another job that I work when the bakery is not open, and while the bakery is open sometimes. I like to be able to spend time at home. I like to be able to do so many other things than just bake. And so for me, keeping it micro has been all about keeping it really high quality, keeping my life really high quality, because when you are, I think, energized and happy and you see customers and customers see you and they see where it's made, you create repeat business. So that's really what I founded this on. And I'm excited to see kind of where it goes from here. And it's just some more photos. I worked with a local photographer who helped capture kind of the build out of my space. And so these photos here are from opening day when we actually had people in our bakery, and we actually bake with the Rothko ovens, which I know some of you at home are familiar with. They are amazing. They are hard to find parts for, but they get the job done. And we've, expanded into a couple of shelf-stable products that we carry as well. But again, it's like I thought about community as the central piece of what I'm trying to bring together, and then myself and my team. And that seems to have built a really great kind of foundation. And we'll see where this goes.
Kevin, will you talk a minute about keeping your menu, how select it is?
Yeah, so as a 213 square foot space, I don't have a ton of room. Like right now, I have a lot of anxiety because we're prepping for the week, and I'm always thinking, where is that bucket gonna go? What are we gonna put this in? Where are we gonna store that? We call my car the mobile pantry because I've always got stuff that I'm bringing to the bakery. And so there's like a running text message list from my team of like, we need this, we need this. And so, yeah, we offer, when I opened the bakery, before I was doing it out of my house, I was just doing bread and our granola. which is made with extra virgin olive oil and dark grade maple syrup. And then moving into the bakery, because of the fact that we're in a food truck park here in West Hartford, I've got a coffee shop directly next to me that's another business. And so I wanted to have things that could go well with coffee. So we offer 3 types of scones. We offer a cake that's just a very beautiful spiced apple cake for now, and a couple of different blondies and brownies and cookies. But we keep it very limited in terms of what we make. My goal every day is to sell out of everything that we've got so that we do not have any waste at the end of the day, but also to have enough so that when people come in, we're not completely decimated. So yeah, so we offer a little bit of what we can, and we keep everything as high quality as possible.
Kevin, one question before we move on. We have a question. How many loaves a day were you making when you baked for your home compared to how many per day you make now? Or is it all on demand?
Yeah, so when I was at home, I was doing it all on demand. So I had an ordering system that started with me using basically just Instagram. I would have people send me messages in Instagram, and I would go and check my schedule and make sure I could fit them in. They would Venmo me. And then I would say the biggest thing I did was I shifted to Shopify to run my website and all of my online transactions. And so at home, I was baking. I remember baking at home, and I'd be like, oh my God, I've got 12 loaves to get done today, because I was mixing them all by hand. I was baking them 2 at a time in my regular home oven with Dutch ovens. And now on average, we're doing a week about 350 loaves here at the bakery.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, it's exciting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I think I'm turning it over to Anne, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello. Thank you, Kevin. Well, I'm Anne. We also started, I think, in a similar way from my home, where I just wanted to learn how to make artisanal crusty bread. And I had twins who would nap, and I had just moved to Westchester County from Brooklyn and found this quiet lull in the afternoon and started to teach myself bread. So at one point someone said, well, I'd buy a loaf from you. And I thought, great, let's do that. So I started sharing, and more people were interested. And what was 2 became 8, became 20. We moved quickly from, I think I did Dutch ovens. We had 2 ovens for a year maybe. And then we built a wood-fired oven in our backyard. And I switched to doing that for 2 years and would fire it up while I was feeding the kids, and had this whole crazy schedule of like, I'd feed the kids at the counter and then watch the fire die, and I'll be right back, and leave like somebody strapped on the counter and run and like rake out the coals, put them to bed. And as they're supposed to be going to bed, I'd be attempting to load that oven. It was very precarious timing, but I'd bake at night and be mom in the day. And then we built up during the pandemic, things got a little crazy. We built out part of our garage and turned it into a bakery, 2 Rofcos. We built a walk-in run by a Coolbot, and just people just felt safe coming, and it was amazing. Like, I had so many pre-orders. We had to really monitor how many loaves were happening and how much room in the house we had to store them overnight or make them. I had a helper. I don't know. And that's kind of how the numbers were creeping up. And eventually it became too much. And New York Eggs and Markets, let this be a lesson to everyone out there, did show up at the door and say, this is too much for a cottage bakery. So I was a licensed home processor, and it's very gray in New York where that is too much for your house. But eventually they came and said, it's time to move and find a commercial spot. So now I'm baking out of a chocolate shop in Mount Kisco, a neighboring town, Masse Chocolate and their market. But after Thanksgiving, we're shutting it down. I'm moving it to another temporary location while we build out a bakery in my hometown of Katona. So I looked when things were getting crazy. What do we do next? This is more, I want to be more than a home baker. I want to do this full time. I want to have staff. I want to provide something in the way of employment for the community, do more donations, be more involved downtown. So how do you do that and maintain balance with home and family? And my husband has gone to part-time. He's making dinner now, you know, and I'm running the bakery full-time. But the last, I guess, 6 or 8 months, we've been really working on building out and all the nuances of the water limits of our town without a sewer system and just on septic, moving to a sewer. I wrote Jeffrey Hamelman, so I figured of all people who might know someone who's done this, he would know, but he did not know how to like exactly how much water a baker might go through in a month. So we had to figure that out. And I don't know, it's been an amazing learning process, but a lot to go still. What else?
I think you give new meaning to the term journey baker or journey person baker with all you're moving your bakery every few months. It's got to be a challenge. And how do you people follow you to your new locations?
We have an amazing customer base. It's grown. Somebody helped me set up a website a couple of years ago, which was huge and instrumental. We went from text orders to email orders to a Google form to a website. Just, I think, when it became legal to do that, make a sale on a website to a home bakery. And then, I don't know, like starting a newsletter was a great thing to kind of get the word out every week. So I'm always trying to keep it interesting. I think I left my job in the city and started doing it full time, but I really have trouble doing the same thing every week. So I switch the menu every week. So every week there's something to write about in the newsletter, like what kinds of breads we're going to make and why I want to make those breads. And then it keeps people coming back and saying, I'm not sure if I like it this week, but next week, I'll take a look and I'll come.
Right. So. And on any given week, how many items do you prepare?
I'm doing right now probably 3 or 4 different breads, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, and then pretzels. Just I cut back on doing a lot of specialty little pastries and just do pretzels.
Good. Yeah. And the numbers that you're doing now compared to before, are you constantly climbing?
I'm constantly climbing, but I'm always struggling with how much oven space and time and refrigeration are huge, huge limiting factors. So at home, I knew I could fit 220 loaves in my walk-in, which would constantly break. And we would put the rack outside to cool it in 30 degrees and then put it in the walk-in to retain that coldness. And now I'm also limited to about 180 loaves per mix day, how much storage I have in the refrigerator. And also I'm baking on 2 Rofcos. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
How much sleep do you want to get and see your family?
Right. And I think that's going to be a recurring theme in tonight's discussion and probably the questions too.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who's next?
Who's next? Conor in Washington.
Conor O'Neill.
Thanks, Ann. Hey, everybody. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for allowing me to be involved. This is a super, super cool opportunity. And I'm just elated to be alongside some really cool panelists with some unique, but also I'm laughing in my head because of how unique and how similar our experiences are as cottage bakers. It's very cool to hear everyone's trajectory and getting kind of a peek into how people have solved these problems in their baking career, but also how they sort of intertwine with your personal life. I think it's really fascinating to sort of get a peek into that. My name's Conor. I own the Cottage Community Bakery in Linwood, and we got started as a cottage operation here in Washington State 2 years ago. And here we are, I'm standing in my retail wholesale bakery that will be opening up this month. We actually just received our health department inspection green light today. So I'm super excited to announce that. Maybe if anyone is following the bakery that's listening, this will be the first time you hear that. I haven't kind of announced that on Instagram or Facebook, but here we are.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm kind of taking it all in today. I got a celebratory coffee, which I don't usually take time for myself, but I made sure to sit down for 10 minutes and really take it all in. But I got started really baking bread in college. I went to Washington State University and I studied communication in hopes of becoming a professor. I really wanted to teach English. So I was super into reading books and super into philosophy and just literature in general. And yeah, I mean, I quickly learned that I did not want to be a professor. So I got a job out of school in marketing and worked there for about a year, and learned that I probably did not want to sit at a desk for the rest of my life. So I, all the while, had been baking a bunch of bread and just really had a passion and fascination with the process. And so I knew that one day I wanted to open a bakery. So I spent some time, I worked at Columbia City Bakery under Evan Andres, still a mentor and good friend of mine today. And I worked with him for about a year before I went on to manage a little coffee shop cafe and roast some coffee, which was another fascination of mine, in addition to baking bread. And you know, quickly started to sort of compile my home baking setup to the point where it's like, you know, Connor, like, what are you doing here? Is this just a passion, or is this something that you're going to take to the next level? And so very quickly I realized that, yeah, you know, this is sort of going to snowball into some sort of a business at some point. And that's sort of how it happened. The Cottage got started right out in front of my parents' house. My neighborhood does like a, you know, annual sort of rummage sale where everyone kind of throws the junk out on the driveway and everybody walks through the neighborhood. And my dad goes, well, hey, Connor, why don't you, you know, you're baking, you know, 3 or 4 dozen pretzels. Why don't you throw those down on a table down at the bottom of the driveway and see what happens? And so lo and behold, I, you know, kind of let the secret out on Instagram, just to some close friends. And everyone's like, where, you know, what's your address? How do I get there? And, you know, within an hour, you know, cookies and pretzels and things like that, a few loaves of bread, maybe at the time I was baking out of 1 Rocco, were gone. You know, the fire department came down in the big fire truck, and you know, that was just exciting to see. And I think that's one thing that we cottage bakers may share, is just that feeling of like, wow, I like spent all this time, you know, making all of these really delicious things with my own hands. And, you know, you get to see the look on people's faces after they enjoy what you put so much work and energy and time into. So I then started to put pen to paper a little bit and was like, well, how am I going to make this possible? You know, how can I kind of really take this to the next level? And all the while I had been kind of following along with, you know, some really notable cottage bakers on Instagram. And I learned that, you know, you got to go to your Secretary of the State and you got to get this license. And you have to go through Washington State Department of Agriculture. And so I made sure I dotted all my I's and crossed all my T's. And one thing led to another. And I had kind of built out a little 180 square foot bakery out of my parents' garage, to their surprise, I think. But you know, I think that they've been extremely supportive ever since the beginning, which has been really, really awesome. I think without their support, I probably wouldn't be standing in my own bakery today. But yeah, I did the cottage bakery thing for about a year. And really the focus there was to, you know, connect with the community, really market test and understand what people really wanted and enjoyed, and just kind of make it more accessible to as many people as possible, week after week. Similar to Anne, I, you know, was sort of approaching the level of sales that you probably shouldn't approach as a cottage bakery. And, you know, it became pretty clear that I needed to get to the next level beyond a cottage bakery after about 10 months. So it was either, well, you could either stop what you're doing, or you could get to the next level and start renting kitchen space or find a place to bake. And so that's kind of what I did. Got to the next level. We rented out a kitchen space really close to home. We moved all of our stuff back into that kitchen. And I think I, at the time, added an additional Rocco, which made things, you know, slightly more efficient. And we continued doing what we were doing. I was able to bring on some teammates, which are still, you know, with me today, and I'm super thankful for them. And yeah, we spent a year in that sort of intermediary, you know, not quite retail bakery with a storefront, but still showing up to pop-ups, doing events, you know, farmers market type things. And, you know, 2 years in the making, I am here in the retail space, and we were set to open in about a week and a half or so. I think that's all I've got. I want to pass it off to Kathleen of Liberation Bakery.
Thanks, Conor.
Yeah, thank you, Conor. That's so exciting that you're opening your retail space. I'm really thrilled for you.
Thank you so much.
They're a really big deal. Thanks everybody for letting me be here. So my daughter Aura and I are Liberation Bakery in the Midwest. We're in Duluth, Minnesota, and I got to this through a journey. I am retired. I'm very, very old, and I worked in real estate. Was a real estate broker for 26 years. And I really had grown tired of working long, intensive, always on call hours. I was really successful. I really liked my work, but I didn't like the level of, intensity to that work. And I've always loved baking, and I was baking at home. I was making, sourdough bread at home and, giving it to my neighbors and blah, blah, blah. We all know that story. As I was kind of reaching this point in my mid 50s, late 50s, I was looking at how am I going to do this? Should I run a bakery? Should I start a bakery? I could do that. And I did what I call the Midwest Bakery Walkabout. I literally went to visit numerous bakeries in the Midwest, people who'd have me where I could just walk in and spend a couple hours talking. And what I learned through that process was that bakers work as hard as real estate agents. It was like that the level of intensity was way too much. And that I really understood that if I opened a full-time bakery, I would be stepping right back into the fire. I wouldn't really be gaining anything. And what I really longed for was a lifestyle that was far more balanced. And so I opened up this bakery. We decided to do the microbakery kind of level because we could keep it small. And I actually hesitated even doing it by myself, but then my daughter became really involved and said, "Hey, Mom, let's do this." And I was like, "Okay, I'm on, let's do it." So we just started, we started very organically by putting a picture of a sweet roll on Facebook. And people said, "So when are you going to start selling?" Right? And so then we opened up in the October of 2018. And I have the great privilege of owning a commercial building in downtown Duluth. So I have a commercial space. I live upstairs. There's commercial spaces downstairs. And there was this little tiny room that used to be a laundry room, actually. It was 10 by 13. And in that space, my husband was kind of help us, organize this. We basically put a commercial refrigerator, a double oven, just a standard General Electric double oven with, steam, with rocks in the bottom or, screws in the bottom. And that's what we baked out of from 2018 until the spring of 2020. And during that time, we really grew our membership, started very casually, we never advertised, we never had to. In fact, people asked to do articles for the newspaper, and we said, no, we don't want that much business. We don't want to be overwhelmed by business. We really want to keep it small. And so our model is basically that we have an email list of people. When we decide to bake, which is typically during the winter every other week, we send out a menu. Our customers through our website, fill out their orders, and then we prepare them and they're ready to bake a couple days later. We do not have extra during the winter. We bake only what has been ordered because the waste part of it just kills me. During the summer, we work markets. So when we do the markets, we do bake extra to sell. So that's kind of how that works. So I want to say a little bit about our name because it's really important. The reason we call this Liberation Bakery is we have three kind of components to it. One is that it's really about me being liberated from working crazy, crazy hours and actually having a regular life. That's a really big part of it. It's also about wild yeast, using wild yeast. We're strong believers in naturally leavened breads and the benefits of that, the flavors, the health, all of that. But we're also really committed to community engagement. So we have a community loaf program where our clients, or members, whatever you want to call them, work with us and make bread and give it away. I think last year we gave over 600 loaves of bread away. And we also raise money for nonprofits, particularly those that work with people of color. And so that's a big part. So that's what Liberation Bakers are. It's about really doing what we want to do. That's what happens when you get old. You get to do what you want to do.
Or you do it anyway.
Yeah, right. For sure. And we bake, just to have a perspective, we started in this little 10 by 13 room with a double oven. And in 2020, we built out in our commercial building, which we own. We built out a bakery that's about, I would say, Kevin, I think my bakery is bigger than yours. I think mine's it's about 350 to 400 square feet. And you can see behind me, we are lucky enough to own a deck oven, which that is not something every micro bakery can do. And I really recognize the privilege involved in that. I worked really, really hard for many, many years to make money. And that's how I'm spending it back there. That's my retirement back there. So, so that's a great privilege, because what we found is that double oven, we could actually bake up to 100 loaves in a bake day, but it took us 7 hours to do it. I was in that little tiny room, because my daughter won't go in there when it's that hot. I was in that little tiny room baking for 7-8 hours. It was really warm. And so now we can get the same thing done, in 25% of the time. It's just fabulous.
So I think and I just want to, because I was looking at the questions, and I think what you were talking about is really great, because somebody asked about financing and how we as small bakers kind of finance all of this. So I didn't know if we wanted to jump into that now while you were talking about the deck oven and how you financed it, or if we wanted to wait and table that later. But yeah.
Yeah, I can just say that I do think the financing piece is really, really hard. It's hard because it's very expensive. This equipment that we use is very expensive. And, but you can grow it versus do it all at one time. It's like one tool upon one tool. We certainly could have continued baking out of that double oven. We absolutely could have, but again, that's my retirement. The amount that we bake would not warrant that kind of expense. It just wouldn't. I think Rothko's or, a double oven or whatever is probably the way to go for a small bakery.
We have a question, Kathleen. What brand or type of oven do you have? The deck oven?
I have a Poland, a used one.
Can you repeat that?
Poland, used.
Ah.
Yep.
And that's a great way to go.
It's 3 decks, it's fully steamed. I can get, 45 loaves, 45 to, probably 55 loaves in one run. It was amazing.
That's helpful.
I think,
Kevin, we'll get to all the questions after. Jackie will go through them all. They're lining up. Not just finance, but income too. Not just your costs, but without sharing your 1040s and 1099s and things like that. Just an idea of some kind of comparison. But first, I think let's complete our journey. Jackie.
Jackie, hi.
Hey. Hi, my name is Jackie. I think it feels like I have the smallest operation of all the panelists here, but I love hearing your guys' stories, because I feel a little bit about understanding all the little idiosyncrasies and the steps to get to that spot. So I run a cottage microbakery out of my own house over in Oakland, California. And it actually started as a stopgap, and currently it still is a stopgap. But during the pandemic, I was working somewhere else, helping another person or one of my friends with her bakery that opened about once every week. And because of shelter in place, I couldn't go there anymore. It just didn't seem like it was the safest thing to do. So what I ended up doing was I just started to bake at home, and I've been baking at home for a long time, probably over pretty over 10 years or so. I got into breads from my husband's mother, who's German, and she has a wood fire oven in her backyard, and she's baking bread too. And I was just like, oh my gosh, if she can do it, then I can do it, right? You know, it can't be that hard. It's actually pretty hard, but I don't have a wood fired oven or anything like that. I just have a 30-inch oven, like a home oven. It's kind of pro-consumer. And I recently got a new convection oven, but it's also small. It's one of those turbo fans that you could plug 110 into. And I use that for a bunch of my pastries. So I started out really small, did a Google Doc and had a whole bunch of, just started with friends and family, maybe through Facebook, try to advertise a little bit. But my husband actually hit the jackpot. And since he's German, he hit the German community. And one of the things that I'm going to share with you guys is that if you can make really good German bread, it's a ticket. It's like Germans miss German bread, real stuff. You know, they don't care about the other fluffy things that you could find. And even artisan bake type style breads are hit and miss, but they love seedy, they love dense, they love these whole grains. And working with Craig and with the Artisan Baking Center, I've been working a lot with whole grains and really great quality flour. And so, I kind of tapped into it. I learned how to bake real pretzels from a German master baker while I was working there. And I added that into my inventory. All the stuff that my husband's been kind of missing, I've been trying to do as well. But my specialty is in bread. I have a hard time moving to sweets. There's just something about it that tugs at me. So my cakes, my pastries, even cookies, I'm not very great at. I do because that's exactly what the customers want. So I pretty much, I try to make sure that I feed my community. Like I want to get the word out. So I do reach out using networks or social networks like Nextdoor. And I do it very, very little because since I'm just working with 2 small ovens, there's not a lot of output that I can do. I started with maybe Dutch ovens at first, but Dutch ovens weren't the way to go. You can't really produce much. I can't do more than 2 loaves. So I maximized my little 30-inch oven to produce 700-gram loaves for each batch. And I pretty much am doing either 1 or 2 batches of that. I have no refrigeration space. So I don't do any retardation at all. Everything is baked with, pretty much the same day. So it made it a little bit challenging. There's a lot of things that I wish I could do, a lot of things that I wish I could bake more of. But at the same time, it's not something that I'm able to do. I don't even know where to begin. There's just so much to this journey. The great thing about being so small and just being able to section out my time baking and developing is you do have that time to develop. I ended up opening up my repertoire to laminations, to croissants, something that I've always wanted to do, but I kind of couldn't squeeze everything in. And at the same time, because it's just me and I'm not really hiring anybody else due to COVID and my house is small, I pretty much have to do things that I know that I have time to do. My whole entire week is based on prep, and I have very few days that are for me. And so one of the things that I've learned very well, and I wish I knew more about, was more mental health and self-care. I think that's about it.
Well, you have a question, Jackie.
I do?
They asked if you're using the Dutch ovens in your home.
No, not at all. So for me to maximize my oven space, I actually decided to use baking steels. So I have two baking steels, one on the bottom, one on the top. The very bottom, actually on the floor of the oven, or just a little bit above, I have a sheet, like a third size sheet tray filled with lava rocks that I use for steam. And yeah, I just load that for my bread. And that's particularly my bread oven. The convection oven that I ended up buying was more for like my bagels and the croissants that I make, and any cookies and pastries. So that one, I don't really do bread, maybe like fluffy rolls. Yeah,
well, that's great.
Oh, I was going to say, one of the things that I am envious about is people growing and people having garage space, because I don't have a garage in my house. So I have garage envy. But I do understand, like, I think part of this roundtable, I think on the top, it says why we want to keep it small. And there's a lot of reasons why I wanted to keep it small. One is the quality of life. I actually used to bake every single week, once a week. I used to do 2 times a week, and now I'm doing once every other week. Partly because like I said, this cottage and microbakery for myself is a stopgap. There are more things that I do want to do, but I don't want to let my customers down. I value them. They were pretty much like life to me during shelter in place, because they came to pick up. I didn't drive everywhere to drop them off. So it was great to have like some sort of interaction. And that's definitely, that was valuable. I really enjoyed that.
Thank you, Jackie. We have a lot of questions to get to. And one of the requests is if all the panelists could list their social media for the attendees to see. If you can type that in, we can go back and start addressing some of the questions. And there are quite a few. One asked all the panelists if there's anyone else doing wood-fired ovens. So you can chat in on that one. But some of the big questions are startup costs, margins. Are you able to afford a lifestyle doing this, or is it a supplement? So those are some of the questions coming in that you can address. Subscription sales, definitely something that more than one request came in. And Anne, I just really want to know, will you tell us what LMNOP means or stands for before we get started?
Sure. It's kind of like, I don't know, multifaceted, but the simplest explanation was that I was learning to bake, and I have all these little kids, and not that many, but 3. And we tuck them in singing lullabies, and the girls, I have twins, they would love when we'd sing like the alphabet song, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they became like LMNOP was like one word in the middle of the alphabet. So we tuck them in, and then I'd go bake, and then instead they would show up again, and instead of giving them milk and then sending them back to bed, I'd give them a slice of warm bread and butter, and that did the trick.
Great.
Nice.
Thank you. Well, Kevin, or do you want to start with subscription sales, and we'll just go around, but we want to cover subscription sales, startup costs, and margins if there are any.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when the pandemic first, I started my business in September of 2019. And when the pandemic struck and we were all told to stay home, I originally had already started a subscription program. And so I had a small list of people that were subscribing. It was 8 weeks. My subscription programs run 8 weeks long. And there's a couple of benefits that I really found to doing the subscriptions. And one is, as a small operation, you get to take the revenue in upfront for 8 weeks of bread. You also know exactly what to kind of forecast for demand. And so that the taking in of the revenue is really important early, because you get to then buy your products without having to shell out money that you maybe don't have yet. And so when the pandemic hit, I thought, well, I'm only going to bake for my subscribers. And then I kind of flipped that. So I'm on the board of directors for a local nonprofit here called Healing Meals Community Project. Our parent company actually started in Sebastopol, California, so out not too far from you, Jackie. And we're an affiliate of Cirrus Community Project in California. So I decided immediately that I was going to do all proceeds of bread to benefit Healing Meals, which is the organization I work with. And then I just opened the floodgates. I said, I'm going to bake every single day, and I'm going to, you know, do as much as I can. But the subscriptions have always and then they kind of grew. I was getting more and more subscribers. So they've remained the foundation. We still do subscriptions out of our little bakery here. We provide free delivery in West Hartford, the area that I live. And we also have people that come and pick them up here. So as, you know, small bakeries and cottage bakers at home are thinking about ways in which to expand their business, I would highly recommend the subscription program. And we partnered with a local florist who's about 25 miles from us north towards the Massachusetts border. And on Fridays, we do a Bread and Bloom subscription. So I met them at an event, and this was a great way for me to send bread 25 minutes north where people can't, you know, might not make the trip down to me. And then I have subscribers that get flowers every week with their bread on Fridays. So start thinking about ways in which you can partner with other small businesses, because I do think that when small businesses work together, you can have a really great impact on the community. And I've gotten so many notes from people who have just said that the bread and the flowers or whatever they're ordering has been a bright spot for them during the pandemic, because they had something to look forward to week in and week out. And because, and I'm sure a lot of us on the panel have also done this, because we started small and started out of our house, I was able to keep my overhead really, really low. So the space that I'm standing in right now, I actually did not take out any debt to finance this space. And I did it all with the money that I was making from selling products out of my house and just kind of putting it away, because I wasn't paying myself to do this. And then getting equipment as I needed it and as I could afford it. So the first two pieces that I could afford were my Fama 40-quart mixer and one Rothko. And so I bought those. And then I slowly just started to add things as I could. But, you know, that's allowed me to kind of build this very small operation using money that I made from starting the business at home.
I think I love what you said about supporting other businesses and helping each other out. I think that's something that we used with a pickup system, pre-ordering. So there was zero waste. And then I at some point it was too many people to come to my house to pick up, and like their cars and what time. So I asked the local hardware store if they would host it, and they did. And then I moved, you know, from a couple different locations in our town for pickups, but they were happy to supply it free of charge to me, but it also generated, you know, 20, 40, 50 people to walk through their doors, you know, and look around. So I think at some point, maybe it's too many bags of bread for somebody, but it does generate a great traffic flow, and someone that might not necessarily stop by that store would go and then purchase something there. So I think it's a great relationship.
You know, and I'm going to add to that. One of the things we feel, so we have these subscriptions. We have these people, members who order every time we bake, but we go into farmers markets during the summer, and we are really strong. Even though we really could function without the farmers market, we go to farmers market to bring our 50 customers into that market every week. And I think that collaboration is so valuable. It's really valuable, really valuable. Yep.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I don't have a subscription model. What I do is I have a pre-order system, which also allows me not to have so much waste. But I do work with the German schools that are around the community. And just 2 weeks ago, they just had a festival for St. Martin's Day, a lantern festival. And I helped them bake these little bread men's. And all the children were very happy because it was something that was very traditional for them. With the I usually bake a couple extra breads, and with the extra breads that I do have, I have friends at the restaurant business. And if you've worked at a restaurant business or know of wait staff there, they don't really have time to eat, and they don't really eat the stuff that's made at the restaurant either. If they kind of, only if they can afford it. And so knowing that our friends at the restaurant are, running around like crazy with their heads chopped off, and, we just give them a little something to smile about. So some of our extra stuff goes to them. I
think that's so really, it's great. Like to be able to give.
I think that's the biggest thing, is just to make people happy. So along with like what Kevin was saying, my costs are very low because I don't have a lot of overhead. I work from home, and the water costs, we have solar panels, so electricity isn't such an issue as well. And all the equipment that I do buy for the bakery is supplemented from all the sales that I do. There is a problem though, because I do have bottlenecks for being in such a small place. And one of the reasons why I am not expanding out is I don't want to have any loans. I don't want to accrue more costs. There are, I guess, the legalities and paperwork when you are hiring people as well. I've seen my friends go through the whole thing when she decided to run her own restaurant with 40 staff. And that's not something that I'm looking for. The biggest thing is don't let anybody convince you to do something more than what you want to do out of your own happiness. So that's one of the advices that I really want to give. And I just saw that, yes, my business is legal. I am sanctioned with the city, the state, and with the health department. Everything is completely legal, what I do. So it keeps my margins very, very small. And I have tried to expand, to grab more electricity into the house. And while I was trying to do that, the cost of doing that is a lot higher than actually me just doing everything just by myself.
Yeah, David, we're not going to report you. You're safe here.
Nothing to report.
we come in peace. Yeah, that's already been deleted. We do have a bunch of questions, and one is like, when did you decide at what point did you decide you needed help, like as labor? And what kind of a decision process was that? Because you wanted to stay small, and now you're getting bigger, but you're still staying small, but you're not as small as you were. How does that unfold?
I think that, for me personally, in my experience, it kind of came naturally going from a cottage operation where it wasn't, I don't know the legality there. I don't think it was advised, nor did I have enough square footage in my garage operation to even have another person join me. I would have loved the help back in the day. But I think it just came naturally for me, moving from a cottage operation and into an actual commercial space, renting kind of a catering kitchen. It became very obvious. Like I knew that my schedule was going to require more hours from me, more hours in the day that I could even, more than 24 hours, and sometimes I had, an unsustainable schedule. And so it became pretty clear to me that I needed to bring on a teammate. Lucky enough, when I brought on my first teammate, she was eager. She had just gotten back from Paris and just wanted to get busy. She didn't care the details. Like she knew what we were all about, and she just wanted to get in the bakery and continue baking and continue learning. And so that was a huge help for me. She kind of super talented baker to be able to work alongside her at the time. She's actually now on maternity leave and is raising her first baby. But I think that it just became pretty obvious around the bakery. It's not necessarily on an Excel sheet when I needed to bring somebody on. It was like, okay, we're getting to this next level. More and more people are wanting more product. I'm gonna need to have an extra set of hands around here. Even if it's not even a baker, even if it's someone who is going to package your products for you, or is going to help you load up the van to get to the pop-up. any extra hands around the operation, the better. And I think it is pretty, it becomes pretty obvious. Yeah, you say yes to people.
Just say yes.
Yeah.
I said that to somebody at a party, like at their house, and they said, is there anything I can do to help? I'm like, I don't have any space. I just need someone to pack bags, like hundreds of loaves, and put on stickers. And she said, I'll do it. I'm like, okay. She's still doing it for free. Wow. Every Saturday morning for 3.5 hours, she packs bread.
Wow.
Totally.
Yeah. And now she's one of my best friends. So there you go.
That's great. We had a question about which flour you guys are using. And I noticed that in your bios, you're all using regional grains, locally milled when you can and where you can, and 100% organic. Is there any way to elaborate on that? You're working with local grains. I mean, there's no more elaboration, right?
I will just say that I'm not working in organic. We do some organic. We do all of our grains, seeds, whatever are added organic. I really I spent a year trying to switch over to organic and had some real challenges with the malting process, adding malt. And so we aren't. Just so that's clear. I don't want to misrepresent myself.
So for me, with the organic piece, I had one customer in my subscriber base who had asked me, she was actually going through chemotherapy, and she had asked me if I could use organic flour for the bread. And so when I was small and I was just like doing, 10 loaves of bread a week, I was just making 2 loaves that were organic, and then the rest were with conventional. And then I thought, like I mentioned, I do work with Healing Meals Community Project, and we do all organic meal delivery for families facing health crisis. And I thought, I really want to switch to organic. And I use primarily King Arthur organic. And Kathleen, the reason I have not switched away from their bread flour is because it's malted. It's actually I
can't get it in the Midwest.
I know that's, and I can't get central milling out here. So it's
I can't either.
A lot of it's so hard.
Sorry, I'm the one using central milling.
Yeah, Jackie's spoiled.
I'm very spoiled with my flours.
You put yourself in that position with a lot of hard work. Yeah. And Kevin, you used a phrase at the beginning that I really like. It's community taught. And that's what the Guild is. It's a community. And when I love that expression, I've never heard that before. I've heard self-taught, which kind of rankles me a little bit. Community taught is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, so I had one of my best friends here in town is somebody so my husband and I moved to West Hartford from New York, and we were probably in New York around the same time at some point. And my husband's a professor at Trinity College, so that brought us here. And we got connected to a local cookbook author through friends. Her name is Terry Walters, and she's been doing sourdough bread for probably 20 years. And she teaches workshops. And so I actually went to her house. We baked bread together. That was the first time I ever made sourdough. I used the starter that she gifted me. That's our mother. I call her Mother Teresa, because she's always giving back to the community. And then, so Terry was like the first person I connected with in bread. And then this is kind of a wild story, and I'll keep it short. There's a baker out of Argentina. His name is Ramon, and he goes by Gluten Morgan. I don't know if anybody follows him.
Oh yeah.
He messaged me, and we were messaging each other on Instagram, and he and his business partner were coming to New York City from Argentina to spend a few weeks. And he wanted me to come down to the city to visit. And I was like, oh, I'm really sorry. I'm too busy. I was working another job and everything. And I said, but if you'd like, you can come to West Hartford. I'll pick you up in New Haven. You can spend the night. You can see the countryside of Connecticut. Thinking he's never met me. He's not gonna get on a train for 2.5 hours, but he did. And we picked him up in New Haven, and he came to our house with his partner, and we baked bread. We started at like 9 o'clock at night. He had told me to have starter ready. And it was his method of how he showed me how to make bread that really started to give me consistent results. And so from that, I really started to be able to scale up my business. Sweet. So that's why I say I'm community taught. I'm not, like, I've done a lot of self-teaching. Like, I've self-taught myself how to do baguettes. But I'm community taught in so many more aspects here in the bakery.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, we haven't heard much about, and I know it's going to be different with each of you, but some startup costs maybe for, well, I guess you did cover it. You started with nothing and then you slowly added. Are you able to have the lifestyle you envisioned and the quality of life you envisioned? And I'm not talking about the financial reward, but separating the bakery from your life, has that really happened?
I think for me personally, and I know that others may have different experiences, I knew that I wanted to get into a retail bakery really fast. I knew that that was the goal. And I knew that with that, I was going to have to sort of sacrifice, whether it was time or whether it was just not paying myself for extended periods of time, whether it was getting the maybe used piece of equipment versus getting something that's brand new. The sacrifices are many, and I think it just is relative to how quickly and how big you want to take your operation. I think it can be done super DIY and it can be done super slowly, and I admire that a lot. And I would actually encourage, cottage bakers now to be really thoughtful about some of the, the costs that are associated with getting started. One of the things I was going to mention earlier was just that, you've got to, of course, take into account the costs that are associated with equipment and ingredient purchasing and perhaps paying staff, but also take into account like those rainy days, like when a piece of equipment stops working or a global pandemic, and you're not able to operate. Definitely, you got to be really, really thoughtful. And I know that that's, very broad, painting with a very broad stroke, and, really isn't offering that much insight or context, but, definitely do your due diligence and do your homework. And I think that also kind of ties into how cool the community is on Instagram with cottage bakers. Everyone is just so excited to share information and knowledge and really lean on those people. They've helped me. It would not be possible without a lot of the folks on Instagram. And I'm super grateful. And I'm eager to offer as much insight as I can at every opportunity. So
it's a super generous community. I don't think I've worked in a lot of funny different jobs, but I've never known anybody as generous as bakers and millers and brewers and growers. Through any conferences you can go to them. Like you're saying with Instagram, reach out. If you admire somebody's baking and you like the way it looks, send a message. Send something. I have done it. People do it to me, and everyone writes back and shares the, answers the question. I went on that tangent, but I was going to say, what you're saying, Conor and Jackie was mentioning, to separate, I think, home life and baking. And can you separate and have a balance? Time management is huge. And oven, like Jackie's saying, like realizing your limitations and embracing them. You might not be able to make everything with what you've got. So figure out what it is you can do and go with that.
And Morgan asked, how did you learn about the financial and the business side to be able to expand into retail? Before you answer that, I do want to say that the Guild is going to offer business classes, and we have a few things in our archives on scaling up. We have one, and we have the business of bakery that was, both were great conferences. Those are recorded. And then we also, the baking classes, you can come take, well, our remote classes are still going, but our hands-on classes should resume soon. And when you immerse yourself with somebody that's been a pro baker or a skilled baker for a long time, or just a baker that's been around that long, and you immerse yourself for a day or two, you'll come away greatly enriched. And even if you can't take those classes, go do a stage. Go spend on your days off when you're not baking, go somewhere else and bake. Jackie did a lot of that, and it pays off. Yeah. Talk about low startup costs, staging.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And for me, the financial side with learning that, I went to school for business and marketing, and I worked in advertising, which for people out there that think advertising is like Mad Men, It's literally a bunch of people looking at spreadsheets all day, managing budgets and figuring out where dollars and cents are going. So I had a decent understanding of like how to manage all of that. But I've also always kind of lived by the rule of like, know what you know and know what you don't know. And so for me, I'm very fortunate in that my dad was an entrepreneur as I was growing up, and he owned a business doing point of sale retail management solution systems for small businesses. So my dad set up our cash register for us here at the bakery. And he actually, I can send him to anybody if you all need somebody. He's retired now, so he will help you. But he also does all of he does my bookkeeping. So he set up QuickBooks for me, and I send him all my stuff on a monthly basis, and he runs my P&Ls for me. And then he's very, very good about, you know, having the talk with me about how staffing costs are, where staffing costs should be, because there are all of these things as you add people, as you add volume, you have to think about how all of that is impacting your bottom line. And some of those things like staffing can run away very quickly if you're not looking at the big picture. So take a look at your network, take a look at your community. It takes a village to kind of create this little environment and figure out, like Ann said, figure out who you can tap into. Say say yes. And when you say, is there anything, if somebody says I need help, you say yes, and figure out what they can do to help, even if it's not directly related to baking.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just going to add too, I think no matter how small or big you are, I think really sometimes the mistake people make is that when they're small, they aren't looking at their numbers. They're just baking and selling, and they're not really thinking about how much money they're actually making on a loaf of bread. How much does it cost to make a loaf of bread or a pastry or whatever? And I think even when you're small, set up an Excel sheet, know what your costs are, look at that and watch it. Because no, we actually don't have, it's quite a freedom, but we don't have a profit motive in our bakery. That's not the most important thing for us, but we still watch that because we need to know. We want to know, like, can we continue to, we sell our loaves of bread for $7 a loaf, you know, can we continue? What kind of a profit are we getting at? Is that enough to pay for the utilities and, you know, the ingredients? We know that our ingredients cost about 23% of each of our products, or, you know, the sales. We know that it's about 23% of that is ingredient cost. You need to know that. You need to know those numbers. So when even if you're small, do that. And that's, I think if you set a foundation for understanding that part of the bakery, then as you decide to grow, you've got something to work with.
And when we talk about costs too, I think it's important for people out there that are like, well, because when I started my business, I was literally buying 5-pound bags of flour at Whole Foods, right? And that when you're doing 10 loaves a week, you can do that. But then I quickly realized, like, I need to switch to 50-pound bags. And I got like, so look in your community for like a restaurant depot or something where that sells to restaurants. Because if you have a cottage bakery, you likely have a tax ID, which will get you into those places. And then get scrappy. Like, I was looking for organic King Arthur, and it's very hard to find because when you go to these websites, they say, these are our distributors, right? But they don't tell you exactly what those distributors carry of their line. And so through some footwork of mine, I found a distributor that's out of Saratoga, New York. They distribute to our area, and they carry the King Arthur organic line, and they carry a whole bunch of organic stuff. And they might distribute to your area too, Hillcrest Foods. And I started buying two 50-pound bags of flour every couple weeks. And they have a $600 delivery minimum. But what they would do for me is we have a big bakery here in town, Hartford Baking Company. And you will see, I don't share this very widely, but I'm gonna let the secret out. They would put the 2 bags of flour on the order of Hartford Baking Company. I would meet the driver at the commissary kitchen. They'd throw the flour in the back of my car, and I'd say, see you later. And so that started with I was going through maybe 100 pounds a month. I just received an order on Monday that's about 3,000 pounds of flour.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's amazing.
they saw that I was hopefully going to grow, and they took this risk on me. But I get much better pricing because of the fact that I'm able to work through a distributor. So for the folks at home, start to do some research, start to reach out, because a lot of times these big distributors want to diversify the portfolio of people they're working with, because when global pandemics happen, the big guys shut down, and it's us little guys that step in to help fill the void, because we have the flexibility to keep working, whether it's out of our house or out of our little operations. So that's kind of my advice. And
you know, we did something like that in Denver, where a bunch of small bakeries, I didn't have a micro bakery, but it was small, it was 1,000 feet. We got together and formed a little group that we could order a truckload of things we wanted, and we would split it up, you know, like, okay, it's a lot of stuff from one company, but by the time it gets split between 10 bakeries, you can store it in your own. And we would just go pick it up from the one bakery they delivered to. So there are ways around that. Yep. I think, Conor, you were going to say something and I cut you off. I'm sorry.
I think Kevin brought up a really good point. I'm working really closely with Cairn Spring Mills. They have blown up in Washington State over the pandemic, which, if you all remember, like March, April of 2020, you could go to the grocery store and not see a single bag of flour on the shelf. And so this local, basically community-driven flour mill was stocking the community, stocking the entire Snohomish County with flour, from retail customers to cottage bakers like myself to much bigger bakeries, I'm sure. And I think I work closely with Puget Sound Food Hub, who is an organic sort of food distributor. And I think it's important that, like, Kevin brings up a good point. Like when drastic things happen in communities in the food structure, the little guys are the ones who are sort of able to sort of fill that void. And I think that is a great way for cottage bakers, even if you're just baking a few loaves at home a week and it's not really a business, talk to those distributors and find out if they're delivering to a restaurant that's right down the street, and maybe they can tack on a few bags of flour for you.
Yeah, we had an interesting comment come in about working with incubators too. Like we have one in Rhode Island called Hope in Maine, and they'll get the orders in for everyone. But Rochelle asked an interesting question. Do any of you wish you had worked in an established or commercial bakery before you ventured out on your own?
Sure, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the opposite. I kind of am glad that I haven't, because it hasn't made me, like, I don't really know what the true rules are. Like,
I'm with you with that. Yeah, I like that. I like that, but for some things, yes, and some things, no.
Yeah. Like, I'm sure there are things I could be doing way more efficiently if I had like staged somewhere or done something with like a big operation. But I always say I'm building the car as it's going down the highway with this operation. And we just kind of figure it out on the fly.
Yeah, I think mine is only for efficiencies, not recipes or techniques, but like systems. Like there's got to be a better system for this that somebody knows in some other bakery.
And I feel like you find the processes that are broken when something fails, right? And then you figure out how to fix that process, and then your system is born. And so it takes a little
longer, but we figure it out.
It does. We all get there eventually.
I have a daughter that lives in Los Angeles, so I went to Los Angeles and worked in Roxana's bakery this spring for a couple of weeks. She let me come in a couple of days a week. And I think that's something as a microbaker, that's one of the things we can do, right? We can actually still go out and have those experiences. And every time I'm in someone else's bakery, I learn so much. I learn so much. It's just, and if anybody's in the Midwest and come into my bakery, they're welcome to come in for a couple of days, just FYI. But you learn so much from other bakers in their spaces. You really do.
Yeah. And somebody asked about I used the word stage and they asked what it is. So I'm going to explain it to everyone. It's spelled like the word stage in English. And it's a temporary trailing in a bakery or kitchen where you go and work unpaid to sometimes it's in the hopes of employment. Sometimes it's in an exchange between two companies, and sometimes it's just a person gaining experience. But right now, with people having a hard time filling labor in their bakeries, now's an ideal time to look for a stage.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the cool things about, you know, having an opportunity to work in a bakery for a little over a year is one of the things you'll learn is just, you know, and you'll do this if you just get started right away, you know, like Kevin and Ann, is getting to, you know, feel the dough every single day and knowing, you know, those little differences. That's maybe something that, you know, if you know, we all know as bakers, the dough is different every single day. And what do we know? Like, how can we sort of decipher what that means? Working at a commercial bakery, you're like getting paid, albeit I wasn't getting paid all that well, but you're getting paid to sort of learn these things. Whereas if you got started right away, sort of build the plane as you're flying it, you're learning that on your own dime or on the business's dime. And that could come to, you know, that could be you could result in, you know, throwing away a bunch of pounds of dough versus, you know, that's just one sort of insight into maybe working at a commercial bakery. You get to feel the dough every single day and kind of decipher for yourself what that means.
It's interesting because as like a baker now, I feel like I don't think I was ready for how quick I would go days without feeling our dough, right? Like I have a baker that works with me now. He actually moved here from Pullman, Washington. And he's now here in Connecticut with his partner. And he does the bread. Like today, we produce all of our bread for tomorrow, and I didn't touch the dough once. So it's an interesting transition of like, how do you, I don't think I realized how quickly I would be teaching other people the craft of baking, because in the labor shortage, I've hired an incredible team, but none of us are professionally trained. So I'm working with people who are home baking enthusiasts, and we're all just kind of doing it. But it's interesting because now he's the one that's doing all of the bench work that I spent years doing. And I still kind of guide him, and I look at it and I say, how's the dough looking? How's it feeling? And then I can now visually look at it every day and know, are we over? Are we under? How's it looking? Totally. Is it cold in here? Is it, you know? So it's been an interesting transition.
I think needless to say, as sort of a, you know, coach now and leader and business owner, I'd much rather take a positive attitude and somebody who's just like willing to get after it than somebody who's worked in a bakery for 15 years, you know? So yeah, it's one of those things.
We have a question. This is a lament, actually. I found an amazing local flour mill and I'm starting with them. What about learning a proper bread baking schedule for a baker who works with wild yeast only? That takes some sitting down. That's where your Excel spreadsheet's going to come in, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Do you know what who asked that question? Let's see. It was Michelle. Michelle, there's something called a Gantt chart that we use to organize, and you work backwards from the oven, basically, to figure out how long something's going to take. So if you know it takes 30 minutes to bake, and you know the final proof is 4 hours or 2 hours or whatever, and you know the intermediate proof is 30 minutes, and so you time backwards, and then you from the oven backwards, and then you know you can set your schedule. Does that make sense?
So I think, and I'm gonna chime in too, because I've worked with those Gantt charts with Craig, and I thought they were super helpful. One of the things that is more challenging with wild yeast is if it's a hot day, your schedule might move way quicker. And right now we're moving into winter, and we work in a building that's almost 100 years old, and I have a giant window behind me, so things are cold. So what might have taken 3 hours in the summer for your bulk fermentation is now 4.5 hours or 5. And I think it's about knowing your grains, knowing your bread, knowing how much levain you're using, and then what your kind of baseline is. Like I know 3 hours is normal, but we can push it anywhere from 3 to 5 hours, depending on how cold it is in the environment.
Well, this is where all those discussions come in, because once you understand the properties and characteristics of ingredients and the principles and techniques of production, then you can make those on-the-fly decisions. And that's where you either have great observational skills over a long period of time, or you take a class or you stage with someone to learn these things. It's not what you know that makes you a good baker, it's what you understand. And that just comes from practice and inculcated repetitions. It's Kevin,
I think it's something I always think about, like a really, really good baker can make really good bread, but they can also problem solve and fix a dough on the fly by just kind of looking at it and being like, okay, I think if I do this, this might work. Like we were doing a new bread a couple
magical,
weeks ago.
Kevin. Very like
yeah.
one, like I got this.
You do abracadabra, but sometimes abracadabra is like throw an extra shovel of flour in the mixer and see what happens, right? Like if you've got a bread that looks terrible and you're like, oh, is that going to come together? Yeah. What do you have to lose at that point? If you've already thought you've lost the whole batch, what do you have to lose by throwing, say, a half a shovel of flour? And we did that with a bread recently. One shovel of flour literally took this bread that was soup, and all of a sudden it came together. And I said to Forrest, who's my baker, well, shit, I wish I had weighed that flour, because then I would at least know
how
what
much
we had done. Yeah, because writing just one shovel of flour in a recipe is not going to help anybody. But again, you just have to be able to like look at it and say, okay, what can we maybe do to fix it? Obviously, you don't want to throw a whole bunch of expensive ingredients at it. But sometimes it's like, well, this is going to be like, we don't do any folding on our bread once it comes out of the mixer. I stopped folding a long time ago because it just took too much time. But I'll look at a dough and I'll say, well, maybe that one we need to fold a couple times to build a little extra strength and get it out of the mixer. So I think those are probably the skills you learn more if you do spend time at a big commercial operation where they're producing at such volume, you can't afford to have a batch of 300 loaves of bread go south, you know?
I'll just say, Michelle, who asked that question, if you want to shoot me an email, I will send you basically a schedule that I put together when I was teaching some classes that might just help you to just get a starter, because I think everything everybody just said is just spot on. You can't stick to a schedule, right? There's too many variables. But to have a starter, I'd be glad to share one with you. So with sourdough bread, because that's what we do. So if you want to shoot me an email at liberationbakery@gmail.com, I'd be glad to help you if I can.
Amanda, did you get that email? Amanda's asking for it too.
Oh yeah, did you get it? I'll just put it on right here. I'll just type it in right here, okay?
Okay, great. Yeah, somebody asked for all of your contacts, and I know that you put your social up higher. Is that a good way to contact you, or?
For me, it's my email.
Yeah.
There we go.
Me too. No social media here. Nothing social here.
And for people at home too, like especially people that are working with natural wild yeast, think about little things you might have. Like I remember working at home and using heating pads, like just like the run-of-the-mill heating pad that you would buy at CVS to put under my dough buckets to like give them, like on a cold day, to give them a little bit more oomph. Or like I put in a Moffat proofer here at the bakery. And now it's like, I remember it was literally the first day I was baking in my new space, and I had come in the morning and my levain had peaked sometime in the middle of the night. And I got here and it was a runny mess. And I said, oh my God, I've got to bake all this bread for today. What am I going to do? And then I thought, well, I've got this proofer. I'm going to take 50% of this runny levain that's just totally spent, and I'm going to make a new levain with a much higher seed. And I tossed it right in the proofer at like 85 degrees. And within 2.5 hours, I had a perfect peak levain, because you can control temperature. So at home, think about little things like I used to use my microwave, which I have one of those microwave hood things above my stove. And with the lights on that light up your stove surface, it was always about 80 degrees in there. So I could proof a tray of croissants if I had been doing some home lamination right in that microwave with the lights on, or the oven light, like, is a great trick. So think about like ways you can tap into some of the things that really large scale bakeries are doing with very expensive equipment at home to help control some of your variables.
Yeah, I boiled a cup of water in my microwave first and then put that tray in there, and it worked great. It's a big microwave that's about all it gets used for. It was here when I bought the house.
Yeah, well, you know, one of the skills I learned too. I'm sorry, I cut someone off.
Go ahead, Jackie.
I was going to say, I learned at Craig's Bakery, because he doesn't have a proofer either. And at the school, I'm spoiled with a proofer. You know, if you have a speed rack with a cover, and you could just boil a pot of water, stick it on the bottom, it'll provide you your humidity, and it'll start heating it up for proofing proofing anything. And it's worked great for my lamination.
And in the summer, you can just use the spritz bottle in there for the humidity. Well, we're getting close to an hour and a half. I want to see if there are any more questions that come in. We did have one that's, I think might be too big for this discussion with the time we have left. I'm having bad luck with creating a starter. What's the secret? Flour and water only. You don't need raisins. You don't need grapes. You don't need to put it outside at midnight and rub a frog's belly. All you have to do
is go get some from someone who has one. Like
that's one way.
That's a perfect answer.
Start with an unbleached, unbromated flour. Use 50% whole grain if you really want to get it going, or rye, 5% rye to get it going. And then 24 hours. Take some out, use that as your build, and put some more in. Maybe the first time it goes 2 or 3 days till you see a little bubbly. You need a warm place in the mid 70s to get it going. That will be ideal. But you know, if your house is a little cooler, it will just take longer. There's lots of good information on the Guild website. You can ask questions on the forum. That's a great place to learn too, by the way, not just your Instagrams, but the Guild forum is, it's archived and it has everything there. We have all of our articles and classes archived too. So if you're not familiar with the Bread Bakers Guild of America, it's bbga.org, and our mission is educating artisan bakers. I want to thank all the panelists tonight. I think we got a little, the longer the bulk and levain, the better the flavor, Michelle, and also the bigger the batch too, the mass effect. We love that. So I just want to thank Conor, Kevin, and pardon me, Jackie and Kathleen for a great discussion. I mean, I'm fired up. I'm ready to go open a little bakery now. I know better, but I'm ready to go do it.
You can come stage at my bakery. How about that?
Thank you.
I'm only an hour and a half away.
And we're getting great comments from the attendees. I just want to say thanks. It was great. This recording will be available in a few days. And thanks for tuning in to the Bread Bakers Guild of America.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. See you later. Happy